Welcome back, everyone. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about a topic that's been on my mind lately, and it's a topic that I'm not sure a lot of people give much thought to, but that is how doctrines such as the doctrine of eternal torment relates to Bible prophecy in general. Over the years, I've come to an understanding that one really can't understand or have a fully comprehensive view of what the Bible has to say about the final state of the wicked without also understanding Bible prophecy and trying to comprehend a lot of the verses that people think are about hell within a much wider prophetic framework. So, how did I come to this conclusion? Well, about 20 years ago, I began writing a work entitled Man Became a Living Soul. Man Became a Living Soul was really the start of the Harvest Herald website, but it was during that writing that it became more and more clear to me that a comprehensive view of a doctrine like hell or of the final state of the wicked or of eternal torment, that we really can't understand the verses that are connected usually with those doctrines without examining those verses in a much wider prophetic context. Any examination of the final destiny of man, by definition, is prophetic. Those verses about hell or eternal torment, they are future events. So by definition, they're prophetic in nature. And those verses appear in a lot of the Bible's prophetic material. So unless we have a fuller view of Bible prophecy, it's going to be very hard to understand sometimes the context in which those verses appear. So it was while I was writing Man Became a Living Soul, and some of the final chapters, such as the chapter entitled Hellfire and Damnation, or the chapter entitled The Wrath to Come, I started to become more and more aware that I needed a much firmer grasp on Bible prophecy in order to figure out exactly what some of these verses were saying. If they didn't apply to a place of eternal torment, then what exactly were those verses trying to tell us? So, for example, a lot of passages about hell, particularly passages regarding the lake of fire, those passages appear in the book of Revelation. And I think you would agree that the book of Revelation is not always an easy book to understand. It's open to various interpretations. It's been very divisive. People have very strong opinions on its meaning. But when I was looking at the verses, such as the verses about the lake of fire, it occurred to me that whether I liked it or not, I was going to have to try to tackle Revelation as a whole. And I'll give you an example a little later about why that is. So when I was writing in Man Became a Living Soul, I just really started to ask myself, could I finish this work without having a much more comprehensive view of Bible prophecy? And what ended up happening is the work actually got stalled while I got sidetracked trying to figure out the wider prophetic context of some of these passages. Well, in recent months, I've been trying to engage more online with people. I've tried to engage on Twitter. I guess Twitter's called X now, on Facebook. And I've been talking to people about some of these topics. And every now and then someone will ask me about a verse in the Bible that they believe is about hell. And it's very difficult in 280 characters or less to give any type of comprehensive view of what I think these verses actually mean. So what I would like to do in this video and in the next few is just go over some of that material, because I believe that some of these verses really have been misapplied to the doctrine of eternal torment, but they really need to be understood, as I said, in a much wider prophetic framework. So what I would like to do today is just give a couple of examples of why this is so and how it is just so easy for the discussion to go off the rails when we start discussing these verses.
And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone.
So the first example I'd like to consider is one I've already alluded to, and that's the mentions of the lake of fire in the book of Revelation. So in Revelation 20:15, we read, at the conclusion of the last judgment, that the wicked are to be cast into the lake of fire. Now, no matter what opinion one has concerning the final destiny of the wicked, be it one who believes in eternal torment or one who believes that the wicked will ultimately be annihilated, or even those who may believe in the eventual reconciliation of all, they're simply going to have to deal with these texts. So, for many, this lake of fire just is hell. And to them, it seems obvious that the Bible, at least in passages such as these, really does teach the reality of a place of endless punishment. But I think it's important to remember what I said earlier. I don't think that any of these passages can be fully comprehended or understood in isolation. They need to be considered in a much wider context, and in this case, both the context of the book of Revelation and the context of the Bible as a whole. Take, for example, Revelation 19:20. There we read that the beast and false prophet are also cast into the lake of fire. Can we really get a comprehensive and proper understanding of what this lake of fire is without also understanding the identity and nature of the beast and false prophet? Well, I don't think we can. But even more than that, we read in Revelation 20:14 that death and hell, or more accurately, death and Hades, are also to be cast into the lake of fire. So I've asked those who believe in eternal torment and believe that this is a literal lake of fire to explain to me just how it is that death, an abstract concept, could literally be cast into a literal lake of fire. And I've never gotten an adequate answer to that question. Likewise, I've also asked if they know the identities of the beast and false prophet. Again, the answer is usually silence. So, while I can't go into specifics today, my point is simply this, that it's just not enough to say that Revelation's lake of fire just is hell, and that hell is a place of eternal torment. The fact that symbolical entities, such as the beast and the false prophet, as well as abstract concepts, such as death and the grave, are also cast into the lake of fire, that should tell us that there's more to this and that we need to be careful and that we need to take the time to consider these passages in a much wider prophetic context.
Fill ye up, then, the measure of your fathers. Ye serpents, ye generation of vipers, how can ye escape the damnation of hell?
Next, I'd like to consider Jesus' teaching about hell. In most cases, when speaking about hell, Jesus used the Greek word Gehenna. Gehenna is a word that appears 12 times in the New Testament. 11 of those appear within the words of Jesus himself. Most English Bibles, such as the King James Version, translate this Greek word, Gehenna, as our English word, hell. However, what many Christians may not realize is that hell is not actually a translation of the Greek word Gehenna. Gehenna actually means the Valley of the Sons of Hinnom. Now, the Valley of Hinnom is a real place. It's a place you can go visit today. It's actually a lovely valley that lies just to the southwest of Jerusalem. So how is it that this word Gehenna, the name of a valley south of Jerusalem, came to be translated hell in our English Bibles? By simply translating Gehenna as hell, our translators have hidden something from us. Now think about it again. Hell is not a translation of the Greek word Gehenna. Gehenna means Valley of Hinnom. So what's going on here? Well, simply this, that many believe that when Jesus spoke about Gehenna, he was using the word in a figurative sense to represent a place of punishment in the afterlife. In other words, they believe that in the times of Jesus, Gehenna meant hell in the same way most Christians understand hell today, as a place of eternal torment. But is this right? If the name of a valley south of Jerusalem came to mean something entirely different, a place of eternal torment in the afterlife, then isn't it worth asking how that happened? Exactly when did Gehenna become hell? Why did Gehenna become hell? Who changed the meaning of Gehenna? I can't go into much detail here, but let me just say that there really are no clear or definitive answers to those questions. Scholars tell us that at some point within the 400 years between the writings of the Old and New Testaments, that as a result of Greek and Persian influence, the Jewish people began to evolve and change their beliefs regarding the nature of man in the afterlife. Concepts like the immortality of the soul led the Jews to consider further thoughts of reward and punishment. And so to some Jews, the Valley of Hinnom, or Gehenna, came to represent that place of punishment. Now, I've got to say that I'm surprised that more Christians aren't disturbed by this. As we'll see in a bit, the Valley of Hinnom, or Gehenna, is mentioned both historically and prophetically in the Old Testament. But it's never even hinted at that the place represented a place of punishment in the afterlife. Should we just accept that when Jesus spoke of Gehenna, he was using the word in a way which the Old Testament prophets never did? In other words, are we really supposed to believe that Jesus' understanding of Gehenna was more in line with pagan Greek thought than that of the Old Testament prophets? And here is where our topic for today comes into play. If Gehenna isn't hell, or a place of eternal torment in the afterlife, then exactly what was Jesus warning us of when he used that word? Again, I don't believe that we can ever have a comprehensive understanding without considering Gehenna and all the biblical data surrounding it within a much wider prophetic context. So let's just assume for a moment that when Jesus spoke about Gehenna, he wasn't talking about a place of eternal torment in the afterlife. Then to what was he referring? Well, one very popular belief is that in the time of Jesus, the Valley of Hinnom, or Gehenna, was being used as the city garbage dump. It's believed that there were fires kept there burning continually to consume the refuse. In this way, it's believed that Jesus used Gehenna as a symbol of final destruction or annihilation. But this view also has a problem. In spite of this being a popular belief, there's actually very little actual historical support for it. The earliest, and as far as I know, only reference to Gehenna being the city trash dump for Jerusalem comes from a Jewish rabbi named Kimchi in the 12th to 13th centuries. In other words, 1,300 years after Jesus spoke. Hardly the type of evidence on which we should feel comfortable building a doctrine. I began this section with Matthew 23:33, where Jesus warned the scribes and Pharisees that they would not escape the, quote, damnation of hell. That phrase, damnation of hell, literally means the judgment of Gehenna. What many may have failed to see in that warning from Jesus is that it appears in a much wider context surrounding judgment upon the unbelieving scribes and Pharisees. What Jesus is actually doing in that chapter, in Matthew 23, is pronouncing national judgment. And that's something I think most people have failed to see. So let's take a look at the full context in which that warning appears, and then we'll come back and look a little closer.
Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! Because ye build the tombs of the prophets, and garnish the sepulchres of the righteous, and say, If we had been in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets. Wherefore ye be witnesses unto yourselves that ye are the children of them which killed the prophets. Fill ye up, then, the measure of your fathers. Ye serpents, ye generation of vipers, how can ye escape the damnation of hell? Wherefore, behold, I send unto you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them ye shall kill and crucify, and some of them shall ye scourge in your synagogues, and persecute them from city to city, that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel unto the blood of Zacharias son of Barachias, whom ye slew between the temple and the altar. Verily I say unto you, all these things shall come upon this generation. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets, and stonest them which are sent unto thee! How often would I have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathereth her chickens under her wings, and ye would not. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate. For I say unto you, ye shall not see me henceforth, till ye shall say, Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord.
Now, let's consider the context of what's going on here. Jesus is nearing the end of his 3.5-year ministry. The Jewish nation, as represented by their leaders, has rejected him. In a series of 8 woe pronouncements, Jesus severely rebukes the scribes and Pharisees for both their hypocrisy and for their love of tradition instead of the truth. He tells them that they're the children of those who killed the prophets of old, and that the blood of the prophets would be required of them. Notice how Jesus concludes this rebuke in verse 38. He tells them that their house is left to them desolate, and then he departs from the temple complex. Now, it's situated right in the middle of Jesus' rebuke that he gives his warning to the scribes and Pharisees that they would not escape the, quote, damnation of hell. And as we've noted, the damnation of hell is literally the judgment of Gehenna. Now, I want you to ask yourself, does a warning about a place of eternal torment in the afterlife really fit this context? Remember, Gehenna does not mean hell. It means the valley of the sons of Hinnom. In verses 29 through 32, Jesus tells the Pharisees that they're the children of those who rejected the prophets. There's something going on here which has been obscured in our English translations. Once we realize that Gehenna does not mean hell, this antagonistic dialogue between Jesus and the Pharisees begins to sound very familiar. The scribes and Pharisees had rejected Jesus, and by extension had rejected the prophets of old. Now, let's look at the words of one of those Old Testament prophets. And I think there we're going to find a very similar scene, this one between Jeremiah and the national leaders of his day.
Chapter 19. Thus saith the Lord, Go and get a potter's earthen bottle, and take of the ancients of the people, and of the ancients of the priests, and go forth unto the valley of the son of Hinnom, which is by the entry of the east gate, and proclaim there the words that I shall tell thee. And say, Hear ye the word of the Lord, O kings of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel. Behold, I will bring evil upon this place, the which whosoever heareth, his ears shall tingle. Because they have forsaken me, and have estranged this place, and have burned incense in it unto other gods, whom neither they nor their fathers have known, nor the kings of Judah, and have filled this place with the blood of innocents. They have built also the high places of Baal, to burn their sons with fire for burnt offerings unto Baal, which I commanded not, nor spake it, neither came it into my mind. Therefore, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that this place shall no more be called Tophet, nor the valley of the son of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter. And I will make void the counsel of Judah and Jerusalem in this place, and I will cause them to fall by the sword before their enemies, and by the hands of them that seek their lives. And their carcasses will I give to be meat for the fowls of the heaven, and for the beasts of the earth. And I will make this city desolate, and an hissing. Every one that passeth thereby shall be astonished, and hiss, because of all the plagues thereof.
Now, notice the scene here in Jeremiah 19. Jeremiah is instructed to confront the elders and priests of the nation. And where was he instructed to take them? Where was this confrontation to take place? Well, in the valley of the sons of Hinnom, or Gehenna. This should already sound familiar. And what was Jeremiah's warning to the priests and elders of his day? He tells them in verses 6 through 8, "Therefore, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that this place shall no more be called Tophet," and I'll just note here that Tophet is another name for the valley of Hinnom, "shall no more be called Tophet, nor the valley of the son of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter. And I will make void the counsel of Judah and Jerusalem in this place, and I will cause them to fall by the sword before their enemies, and by the hands of them that seek their lives, and their carcasses will I give to be meat for the fowls of the heaven and for the beasts of the earth, and I will make this city desolate." In verse 11 he tells them, "Thus saith the Lord of hosts, even so will I break this people in this city, as one breaketh a potter's vessel that cannot be made whole again. And they shall bury them in Tophet till there be no place to bury." So I just want you to notice, what we have here in Jeremiah 19 is the prophet confronting the wicked national leaders of his time. Well, Jesus, as the Son of God and the greatest prophet, confronted the wicked national leaders of his time. Jeremiah warned the leaders that their nation would be made desolate. Jesus told the scribes and Pharisees that, quote, their house was left to them desolate. Jeremiah warned of the judgment of Gehenna, that the whole nation would be destroyed and be made like Gehenna, and that they would bury corpses in that valley until there was no place left to bury them. And Jesus warned of the judgment of Gehenna. And so, all of the sudden, the connection between Jesus' words in Matthew 23 and those in Jeremiah 19 should be obvious. The only reason it wouldn't be obvious is because Gehenna has been translated hell in our English Bibles. Now, I asked earlier why any Christian should accept that Jesus ever used Gehenna in a way which was completely foreign to how the Old Testament prophets represented that place. And once we compare Matthew 23 and Jeremiah 19, well, now I hope people can begin to see why simply translating Gehenna as hell in our English Bibles is such a problem. The word hell, which people believe to be a place of torment in the afterlife, is a word which conjures up all kinds of mental imagery. But that imagery has nothing to do with how the prophets actually spoke about the place. Now, to be sure, the judgment of Gehenna, proclaimed by Jeremiah, a judgment in which the nation would be destroyed and desolated, and one in which there would be a great slaughter of the Jewish people, well, that picture is horrifying, and we should make no mistake about the severity of that judgment. But as horrifying as that picture is, it has nothing to do with a place of eternal torment in hell. Does it make any sense at all to believe that the context of Matthew chapter 23 is any different? Jesus, after all, is confronting the national leaders, just as Jeremiah confronted the national leaders of his day. In a scathing rebuke of judgment upon the unbelieving nation, Jesus warned the Pharisees that the shed blood of the innocent prophets would be required at their hand. He tells them that their house is left to them desolate. A warning about an eternal hell makes absolutely no sense in that context. What does, however, make sense is that Jesus is warning of an impending national cataclysm in just the same way Jeremiah warned the wicked national leaders of his day. Can we prove that this is what Jesus meant when he warned of the, quote, judgment of Gehenna? I noted earlier how simply translating Gehenna as hell raises all kinds of questions. We know that the Old Testament never uses Gehenna as a symbol of judgment in the afterlife, or for that matter, the Old Testament as a whole says nothing about the eternal punishment of the wicked. I pointed out how even an interpretation which believes that Gehenna was a burning garbage dump in Jesus' day and thus a symbol of destruction or annihilation, how even that interpretation rests on pretty shaky evidence. What I hope to show in upcoming videos is that we can be sure what Jesus meant when he used the word Gehenna, and that his usage of the word is in complete harmony with the Old Testament prophets. In fact, what Jesus said about Gehenna can really only be understood in that wider Old Testament prophetic context. So, no, Jesus was not warning the scribes and Pharisees of hell when he rebuked them in Matthew 23, but of an impending catastrophe which was about to come upon them. But as we're going to see moving forward, once we realize that, the need to understand many more traditional hell verses, well, understanding those in this wider prophetic context becomes even that much more important. So that's going to wrap it up for today, and we'll continue this discussion in the next video. But for now, I'm David with the Harvest Herald, and I'll see you in the next video.